Good morning, folks. We've got the Climate Solutions Caucus here at our June meeting to review our accomplishments on the year, to get an update from Johanna Miller on the work of the Climate Council, and also to talk a little bit about next steps for our work groups, which we expect will begin to convene at the end of the summer. And so I think Chris and I are going to need to tag team some of the accomplishments, and you all can sort of fill in as we go. So do raise your hand if you can think of one of the accomplishments that we didn't list. But I've got a very nice summary that Ben Walsh at VPIRG put together here about all of the climate investments in our budget. And of course, it's too long to list itemized, but I will send an email out to folks later today, because I suspect we'll have some long floor debate where I can compile all this into a nice handy cheat sheet. But in the budget, we've got $250 million over 3 years for climate, including a number of places where we're investing in low-income weatherization, VHFA weatherization, Efficiency Vermont weatherization, and workforce development investments. We've got some some money going into DPS for their future plan. VHCB conservation projects are included in that group. And then we've got a good list of T-bill investments that we have just talked about, as we talked about Representative James investing in a new EV so that she was able to take advantage of EV incentives, as I hope we all will when we trade out our next vehicle. So T-bill modernization investments, and Transportation Committee people, please correct me if I miss anything. Great work. We put $3 million into incentives for new EVs, up to $250,000 for Drive Electric Vermont. As you all know, if you have tapped into the great information and skills sharing that Drive Electric provides for Vermonters, it's a great way for Vermonters who are unfamiliar with electric vehicles to learn more, and for users of electric vehicles to share best practices and tips. $750,000 for Mileage Smart, in addition to the $500,000 that is in the budget. So does that mean we've got $1.25 million? Okay, Molly's nodding yes, thank you. 1.5 million for Replace Your Ride, outstanding. That is awesome. Get some of these old inefficient vehicles off the road, replace them with highly efficient vehicles. That's the way we need to be doing this. 1 million for charging infrastructure, either at or near multifamily housing. As we all know, it's a barrier if you live in an apartment or condo complex, if you have the inability to get charging infrastructure set up. And 50,000 for e-bike incentives. And we were talking before we got started about the number of us who have e-bikes and are really appreciating the versatility that offers as we use them for our around town commuting. So there is 3.5 million for e-buses and 5 million for Better Places grants. And if anyone else has any other details about what I missed, please raise your hand and jump in terms of budget investments. Chris.
Well, I see, I just admitted Mary Hooper, so she unfortunately didn't hear your list, but obviously would be knowledgeable. But I just want to point out, I saw in the paper a story about the buses for Green Mountain Transit, and the fact that the mask mandate holds there because they're federally funded now. And that was not something we did, but the feds have, I think there was a pass through. So buses continue to be fare free all across the state. which is important for our low-income neighbors, and also for some efficiencies of keeping the bus running on time, so you don't have to stuff that little bill into the slot. That tends to make pickups a lot faster. So just something else that you may encounter, and something we can celebrate.
So that was a lot of the budget investments that we made this year. And I think it's worthwhile just celebrating for a moment the advancements that we made in some of the bills that we were tracking at the beginning of session. So for that, I'm going to ask for other folks to jump in and help, because, you know, in the 3 weeks since we adjourned, all of the bill numbers have gone out of my head. So we had the contractor registry, which is moving along. It's very close to the end, but I think that it's probably not likely to get across the line unless for some reason we have an October session. Scott, do you want to give just a 30-second update of where that bill is?
Sure. So it passed to third reading on the last day by a vote of 20-10. So it looks good for passing the Senate. I don't know when they're going to take it up. Probably not today. So it'll be next session that we actually see it again. The Senate Committee on Economic Development made a few fairly minor changes. Tom Stevens isn't with us, but his reaction was, "Why did they change anything at all?" But I think we could concur in it and just pass it. Would be my recommendation. So we'll see what happens after that.
Great. And of course, our Transportation Modernization Act that we started tracking at the beginning of the year was rolled into our T-bill. So Becca, do you want to give a sort of a 30-second summary of what that looks like for now and into the future?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Well, all the great things that you listed off with our budget and just the transportation parts of that were really coming out of H94 and what ended up in the T-bill. And what was exciting to see in the crossover, shout out to the senators for increasing some of the amounts on those programs like Mileage Smart. Overall, there were, I'd say, minor changes besides what you listed off with the big budget allocations. Something to put a pin in that might be exciting for this group is I think we're going to try that strategy again. So if you want to learn more about transportation innovation coming in 2022, I think that would be something to let me know about, let other members of the committee know about, because we're going to try that again. Is there anything else that is relevant you want me to cover?
I don't know, Molly, can you think of anything else on T-bill, or we must have other?
I'm thinking about the emissions repair program.
Good one.
And that was, you know, and again, thanks to the Senate for putting the money in to allow DEC to get an administrator to do a program that will actually help people, low-income people, fix their cars that can't pass the OBD inspection, the check engine light issue. For now, we've had a waiver. People have been able to wait a year to get it fixed. And that means that, you know, there are a number of cars driving around that are, you know, polluting. So that was another victory, I would say.
Excellent. Chris, what do you have?
Well, you may not have noticed it because it happened very quickly at the end, but we did pass a tax policy for storage on the grid, and much appreciation to Briglin and everybody in the Energy and Tech Committee and to Ways and Means, because it was in my committee, Finance, for a long time and really stalled there, but folks on the House side were willing to pick it up very quickly. Not a huge deal, but storage systems, big batteries on the grid that are distinct from a solar array. And there's already one in Heinsberg, and you know, this is really actually important for our grid resilience. We had no mechanism to tax them. And it was a case where developers were saying, give us some certainty. We were willing to pay taxes. We just want to understand what it is so that we can figure out the economics of it. So that actually for the industry is pretty important. And I think there's only one other state that's done that. So that was an important one, and that did get to the governor right at the end. Very nail biter, you might say. We of course had our broadband bill. A lot of us worked on that. That's I always count that as climate infrastructure, but also some other ones that jump to mind. We did a composting. We made it a little bit easier for farms to diversify and accept some compost, which has a climate impact, of course, because of building soil health and sequestering carbon, but also because a lot of our food scraps are going to Maine. In fact, they get trucked to Maine. So we're hopefully localizing that and reducing the miles that our food waste travels. And I have just gotten confirmed that we do expect to do third reading on the contractor registry today. It's up for action. So, maybe if our veto session really gets drawn out, you'll have a chance to concur on Friday. I don't know. Maybe I forget how the calendar works. I'm happy to take some other ideas if we've missed some bills, if people want to jump in quickly, but we should get to Joey because that sort of talks to our big budget item and the work ahead.
Jim Maslin.
Yeah, thanks. Briefly, I've had a complaint about the contractor registry bill from a constituent who's he has no employees, but he works under an LLC, a corporation, and under the contractor registry bill, his fee is I think $1,000 instead of whatever it is, 250 or something like that. And I wonder if next year we might consider an amendment to that, assuming it passes. Too short to do it today. A corporation with only one employee might qualify for a much lower registration fee. I think that would be reasonable, fair, and we can talk about it in January or before. But thanks for entertaining the idea.
Yep, let's make sure that we raise any questions or concerns that we're hearing. Since this bill is not yet across the finish line, there's still time to double check to make sure that we're crafting the bill in a way that works for all of our constituents. Carrie Dolan.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention the passage of H108, which was, as you may recall, a clean water bill, but it was also a climate bill. The bill does two things. One is to articulate that a longstanding practice that wetlands are included as a resource for protection under the state water quality standards. They were interpreted that way, but we articulated and clarified that. And we know that wetlands, along with our other nature-based solutions, provide an important flood resilience and climate resilience strategy for our communities. The second component of it was strengthening our Clean Water Act tool called on the federal side, 401, Section 401, which requires the state to rule that a project that requires a federal license or permit needs to ensure by the state that it meets our water quality standards. We added an alternatives analysis to that process. The key thing for that is that when we will anticipate proposals to bring pipelines, for example, through the state of Vermont, we now have the tools in place to fully evaluate the merits and to ensure that any pipeline or any large project being proposed, such as any oil or gas pipeline, will need to go through this state process. It mirrors what New York has and Connecticut has, and has been very effective at leveling the playing field and addressing these impacts before they occur.
Thanks, Carrie. So if any of the rest of you have other bills that you want to celebrate and have included on our list of climate victories for the year, please do send those to me by email. I'll be plugging away at it while we're listening to floor debate. And so now I think we should shift gears. Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce the next section?
Sure, I'm glad to. We have asked Joey Miller from VNRC to join us. She's also a member of the Climate Council to talk about that. As we think about our accomplishments this past year, I'm getting some F-35s. The big one has to be the $200 million that Chair Hooper and others parked ready to respond to the climate plan. So we need to be paying attention to that and understand those dynamics and have it inform our work this fall. So we've asked Joey to come and just give everybody an update on the working of the Climate Council and the timeline and how we might fit in. So I'll turn it over to Joey, and you're a co-host, so if you want to share slides, go right ahead.
Thank you, Senator, and good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all on your little screens. Happy summer. It's been glorious. So great to be here with you this morning. Yeah, I would say that just let me first apologize for not having a significant amount of prowess at PowerPoint, but I do want to just, I thought it might be helpful to share a few slides that can focus the conversation. And I'll kind of walk through it fairly quickly, give you an update, and then maybe if the process allows, Senator Pearson can just take questions that may be
That'd be great.
Get to more level of specificity. So Johanna Miller, Joey, I lead the Energy and Climate Program. I'm the House appointed member representing the environmental community in Vermont, which is a big important role, and the environmental community is not monolithic. So this is humbling, important work, and I'm grateful that you guys have set the stage for this work to happen. The process is deeply underway. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. And just as a reminder, okay. Just as a reminder of the work that you all made possible and charged us with undertaking. So the Global Warming Solutions Act, as you well know, turns our long-held, pollution reduction goals into requirements, and these are the very, this is the basic requirement is the 26% below 2005 greenhouse gas emission levels by 2025, and 40% below 1990 by 2030, and 80% below 1990 by 2050, net zero by 2050. I just wanted to share that as a sort of like, that's our broad charge, but it is also much bigger than that. Why won't it let me go forward? Hang on. Here we go. It is much bigger than that, and it is happening via the work of 5 subcommittees. And again, this is just to bringing us up into the same page. Then I'm going to get into more of the update and the specificity. But there were 4 subcommittees that were that were outlined in statute, and those include the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, and that's really the subcommittee that is focused on the clear energy sectoral strategies, which include generation and supply, thermal buildings, and transportation, as well as non-energy, which includes waste and industrial processes and other things. So cross-sector mitigation, I am one of the members of those subcommittees. As a reminder, there's 23 appointed members of the Climate Council, 8 secretaries and commissioners, and 15 others like me that have been appointed by you all. So we have dispersed the 23 members to formulate, within those subcommittees, within that structure. And then we went through a process of bringing other Vermonters in as subcommittee members. So we have a broader cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, for example, really bringing more expertise and lived experience into these subcommittee structures. So the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee The Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee, looking at recommendations and strategies for rural communities. How do we strengthen infrastructure? How do we address vulnerabilities in our communities? Looking at the distributed local electrical system, et cetera. There's an Ag and Ecosystems subcommittee, and looking at how do we maximize and really harness the values of our natural assets for carbon storage and other benefits that they provide, including the role of our agriculture and forest systems in so many ways in the climate solution strategies. And then importantly, the Just Transition Subcommittee, really looking at our strategies through a broad lens, ensuring that they are not disproportionately impacting, lower income or rural, marginalized and BIPOC communities, but more so that, we are really in both the process and in program and policy design, sort of really beginning to center, more marginalized, vulnerable folks in the design of our strategies. So the Just Transition Subcommittee, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, has been really doing a tremendous amount of very valuable work, setting the stage for us in our subcommittee structure to think broadly about, really the impacts of how these different strategies are impacting and or benefiting more lower income, vulnerable BIPOC Vermonters. And they have put together some great principles that we will overlay into our strategies. And I'll talk more about that in one moment. And then lastly, the Science and Data Subcommittee was comprised, and that was not identified in statute, but obviously, as we know, founding this work, fundamentally on, good information, the latest climate science, really peer-reviewed data information will be critical. So this subcommittee has been really looking at the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and our carbon budget. They're really doing really important work to, again, ground us in sort of a shared foundation of information. So again, most of the work right now is happening through those 5 different subcommittees. So much so that most of those subcommittees are either meeting weekly or bi-weekly. And the Climate Council meets monthly. Our next council meeting, our full council meeting, is next Monday. And at that council meeting, we are going to be talking about, getting an update on the work that's happening at the subcommittee level, which includes sort of work to develop the initial sort of strategies that will then go out for public input and public engagement. I'm sharing this slide provided by the Agency of Natural Resources about the Climate Action Plan development timeline, because it will give you a broad sense of the general timeline of the work. And let me just say too that, again, as the subcommittees begin to develop their initial strategies and potential recommendations, it's a little bit of a challenging process because we don't want to get too far out in front of the public engagement process, which is being led by a team of consultants, RISE Consulting based in Montpelier, and Climate Access, a consultancy based in out west. So they're a team of experts who have been working most closely with the Just Transition Subcommittee to develop a public engagement process that is different than business as usual and really seeks to engage and sort of fundamentally start this conversation and this work in a different way, so that we are reaching out to audiences and Vermonters that we have not traditionally engaged very well in the past. So that public engagement work is actually in June. They are starting that. They have been undertaking that work, starting it with, I think, some small stakeholder groups, in total about 50 or 60 Vermonters engaged in a conversation about, how can we engage them in this process, And over the course of time, as the Climate Council develops the first plan and then also continues to do this work, knowing that even when we are, required to deliver an initial plan this December, this work will not be done. We need good public process and public engagement strategies over the course of time. So the public engagement team and the Just Transitions team is leading that work this June to do the initial very targeted stakeholder outreach, including a direct outreach to a BIPOC affinity group. So really trying to step back and sort of identify folks we have not very well engaged early in the past or ever potentially, and make sure that that process informs ensuing public processes and certainly the recommendations that will be coming out. So that is June work. Simultaneously, while the subcommittees, including the one I'm on, the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, are laying out their initial strategies. Tomorrow is our cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, where we will walk through, and this is where I want to just put a finer point on this for you all. The cross-sector mitigation subcommittee in particular has sort of organized itself around the sectoral structure. So we have a transportation task group, of which I am helping to lead that conversation. So looking forward to talking with folks digging into the transportation committee work in the legislature. So there's a transportation task group. There is a buildings and thermal task group. There is a generation and supply task group. And then there is that waste and industrial processes task group. So tomorrow will be the opportunity to hear from the generation and supply task group and the buildings and thermal task group. 2 weeks ago, we outlined our initial transportation strategies, and then the non-energy sector outlined their initial set of strategies. I share that with you just to give you a little bit better clarity of like how some of this work is being designed, but also to say this is the beginning of a process that will really ramp up in terms of public engagement and input opportunities in July and August, when we're going to develop and outline the initial set of strategies and recommendations. Those strategies and recommendations will go out for public comment, as you can see here, sort of September, October. In November-ish, there will be a full draft of the climate action plan reviewed by the council, and by December, by statute, we're going to adopt an initial plan that will be focused really critically on the 2025 targets, because they're the sort of nearest term targets. And then the initial plan will go out for more public input into the early part of 2022. And as you can see here, there's a lot of work related to sort of economic modeling and other work that is going sort of simultaneously with this timeline. This is my last slide, and I just wanted to note too that this entire endeavor is founded on a different type of public engagement and public process, knowing that we want this endeavor to succeed. We have the need to bring all Vermonters into this conversation or understand like how these strategies will affect them, so that we can craft our recommendations to benefit and avoid, mitigate any potential negative impacts. So this public engagement process is very important, deeply underway. It's also being supported by partnership with CBI. It's the Consensus Building Institute. That's the consultancy that the state has hired to support this entire process. So they're really supporting this work. There are going to be at least 3 touch points along the way for the public to weigh in on that process. And really important to note that the work in the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee in particular is being very strategically, intentionally designed in coordination with the Public Service Department, who is also simultaneously required to do an update of the comprehensive energy plan. So the public engagement for the cross-sector mitigation, the sectoral strategies, is going to happen concurrently with the Public Service Department and their initial outreach on the comprehensive energy plan. So that will start sort of this summer. And then, as you will see, we'll deliver an initial plan by statute in December. And then we will have much more work to do. So there's a ton happening. There are so many good people doing so much important work. You all really made this possible. And it is my hope, I don't know what exactly that looks like, but this partnership with the legislature is, the policymakers, and your role is the what you did the budget this session, really, really important foundational component. So I'm very happy to give this quick overview. I'm happy to answer any questions, and ton happening.
Joey, thank you so much. Well, Jim, you have a question. We don't have a lot of time for questions. So Jim, okay, go. You get the
Yeah. Joanna, I'm really impressed with the way you divided up the subcommittees. It is fascinating. And I think that the way you've apportioned the work is going to lead to some tremendous results. So thank you very, very much.
You guys did that.
Well, you're making good use of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
to
see it in print, to see it in black and white or whatever, is all a good thing. So thank you.
It's a classic legislator move. What you've done is brilliant. Actually, you did that. Okay. Joey, thank you. We all wanted your leadership team wanted to ground our next few months in the climate council, because this is where the budget, we're going to need to spend. We have the opportunity to spend in these investments. But as you just saw, there's a real timeline that actually dovetails nicely with our off session, which is sort of July through December. So so from where we're at right now is we have our working groups, right? We have probably a need for some time off from our volunteer job in the legislature. And we have a great opportunity this fall with the Climate Council's work and our own getting organized ready for January. And so what the vision we've had is that we all take some room to breathe. We can engage and watch the Climate Council as they do their preliminary public outreach work this summer. And then we want to have everybody come together for an in-person meeting on September 10th. So mark that in your calendar, please. That's a Friday, September 10th. And we see that as a real beginning of a more intense working time for our working groups and getting ready, engaging with the council process. We hope actually to invite to have a more thorough presentation at some point in the fall from the council, from members of the council. Now, if you're on a working group and you want to meet between now and then, go for it. And people who haven't yet plugged in, the working groups are workforce, because all of this is going to need hands and boots on the ground. Municipal and schools, agriculture and food systems, equity, and then we have kind of ongoing transportation and resiliency. So those 6 groups, plenty of time and opportunity for legislators to engage there. And the hope is that we're monitoring the plan coming out of the Climate Council and also maybe complementing it. We don't know if they're going to say, make investments in X, Y, and Z in a very detailed way, or they're going to say, X millions needs to go into transportation, figure it out. We want to be ready, because clearly we have this opportunity in January to hit the ground running. We have the funds, we have the plan, or the beginning of the plan, but as we know, we will have a session with precious few weeks to nail down some details. So that's where we're at. That's where our thinking is. And we'll throw it out to questions in our last 2 minutes here, because I know House members need to get to the floor. And Joey, can't thank you enough for giving us this update. We will ask you and others back to keep us plugged in on the details of your good work. Any questions? Does that make sense? Has everybody already put September 10th in their calendar?
Baxter's looking forward to coming as well. Thank you, Baxter, for making an appearance at Climate Caucus meeting. Look forward to getting to work with you all, getting to actually see you all in person. And I'll get a follow-up email out later today with a repeat of all this information. But let's take some good, intense relaxation over the next month or 6 weeks and be ready to hit the ground running in September.
Chris, do we have a time for September 10th?
We don't. I would anticipate it be much of the day or the afternoon, something like that. So if you, we haven't pinned it down more than we were quite proud that we landed on a day. So. All right, let's keep in touch. Thank you, everybody. Good work this session, and proud to be part of this group. And we'll talk soon.